this certainly has not been a typical year, and this will not be a typical State of the Schools address either. As you can see, there will not be any student presentations. There's not going to be our high school honors band or high school honors choir or orchestra or the jazz ensemble, which I know we all love. But what I do hope to provide for you this afternoon is basically a glimpse into what we've done this past year, what we've accomplished this past year, our challenges as well as our successes. So as we begin this journey, let's go back to March of 2020, some 422 days ago, to a time when words like COVID, social distancing, mitigation strategies, masks, PPE, quarantines, well, those were words that we never spoke. And at times it's very difficult to remember life that was pre-COVID. But for this purpose of this meeting, I'd like for us to look back through the lens of what we knew at that time, not how we see things now, because then things looked very, very different. So much, in fact, that on March 2nd of 2020, our board held a town hall meeting that included some 60 plus community members in attendance, and not a single mention of COVID. March the 2nd of 2020, but yet 7 days later, I sat with my leadership team as the first report of COVID in an Indiana school was relayed to us. And I consulted with healthcare professionals that day, and then that night I made the statement at our board meeting that we were monitoring the situation and that we would act appropriately based upon the advice of healthcare professionals. And the next day, a meeting was held with healthcare, business leaders, elected officials, and education leaders to discuss what may be coming our way. All of us were gathered in a room together. One room, no mask, no social distancing, and no mitigation strategies at all. Things were different. After that community meeting, I went back to my office to test a system that we had seldom used. It's a system you now may be familiar with called WebEx. It's strange to look at my calendar invite to see a time when we were so unfamiliar with that tool that we actually had to test the system to see how it worked. But I am so grateful that we did, because we have relied on that so much. Well, Tuesday evening, I was supposed to go to the PEF Technology Showcase at Ivy Tech, but I canceled so that our leadership team could continue to meet. And our team met the next morning to finalize what we knew at that time so that we could provide support and information to our principals and to our district leaders on WebEx, with 125 attending that meeting virtually. And then on Thursday, our team meetings continued with an even greater amount of urgency, and conversations with the health department continued. The mayor called a meeting with government officials, with healthcare professionals, and with educational leaders. And based upon the advice of our healthcare professionals, it was decided that schools would close at the end of that day. And a news conference was scheduled at 4 p.m. that afternoon. Well, I hurried back to my office. We crafted a statement that we were going to send out to her parents. And then I hurried back to the mayor's office for that press conference. And I learned then that there would not be closing schools that day, but that would be delayed until the next day. And one of the things that is vividly burned in my mind is calling Jason Whipkenberg at 4 p.m., by the way, with the cameras rolling in the press conference saying, "Jason, don't send the message." "What? Don't send the message." "What? I gotta go. Don't send the message." Click. That's the last time I hung up on Jason, but not the last time I wanted to. Sorry. But you know what? In all seriousness, that's just a glimpse into that first week, and that first week of so many weeks to come, that things change day by day and sometimes hour by hour. And little did we know that our initial 2-week closure would ultimately end with us not being able to return to school for the remainder of the school year. So this question has been asked of us so many times. How have you been able to successfully navigate the pandemic? In essence, how have you been able to do what you've been able to do? And as I reflected on the elements that enabled us to successfully navigate this pandemic, an interesting thought has come to me. Challenging times don't change who we are. Challenging times simply magnify who we already were. So the answer to that recurring question is simple. Long before the pandemic began, in fact, over the past decade, we have been developing and implementing those systems, structures, and support mechanisms to the point to where they are now embedded in our institutional DNA. And I hope you'll see how these pre-existing elements enabled our success throughout every stage of our pandemic journey. So in 2015, we implemented the Director of School Support model, and you may remember this having been discussed and highlighted at a previous State of the School address. Essentially, rather than having one district level official support 40 building leaders, we now have 6 individuals who support anywhere from 4 to 12 principals in schools. And the number of principals assigned to each director of school support is based upon the unique needs of each individual schools. And since we have implemented this structure, our principals have consistently rated this support as a key element to their success. So when we needed to gather and disseminate information so quickly in that ever-changing environment, we already had the capability to do just that. We were also able to better provide more equitable access for our families for both technological and nutritionally, thanks to our existing infrastructure. The EVSC has had one-to-one devices since 2008, and we have heavily invested in classroom technology for many, many years. And that's allowed our students and our teachers to become very, very proficient with the latest technology. And our already successful summer feeding program enabled us to continue to feed and provide food for all of our students by scaling this model during last spring's closure. And I'm sure you've seen articles and information that talk about social emotional learning and mental health concerns that have been brought on by the pandemic. And each time I see a reference to these practices, I look back and think of how far we have come in the last 7 years. GAIN is EVSC's growth in academics through innovation and neuroeducation. And it is our neurodevelopmentally sensitive framework that aligns our systems, our structures, and really our mindsets and the decision-making that we have with human and brain development so that every single student can develop to his or her maximum potential. And the ability to communicate quickly, accurately, and effectively is essential in normal times, but it is an absolute necessity in a crisis. And we are so blessed to have expertise on every media platform to communicate with our students, our families, as well as our staff and our community partners. And this capability enabled the EVSC to reach unprecedented numbers of stakeholders with critical and often ever-changing information in a very timely manner. And while each of these 5 elements has been vitally important to our success, I would suggest that operational excellence is that secret sauce. I believe our unrelenting effort to continually to improve is what separates from all others, and it is what ultimately propelled us to accomplish so much during a worldwide pandemic. And as you can see, each of these 5 embedded pre-COVID elements was fundamental to our success throughout every stage of the pandemic. And as I've shared with you, the system processes, the structures, our practice, well, the EVSC way, if you will, of doing things, well, all of these elements were in place before anyone ever spoke the word pandemic. The EVSC way is what has allowed us to pivot on a dime, and it is what has allowed us to continue to do so through the last 13 months. And now I'd like to share with you some of the things we did specifically in response to the pandemic. So once again, let me take you back to where this all began. On March 12th, 2020, the governor signed an executive order allowing for 20 waiver days. And then during our spring break, he announced that schools would stay closed in Indiana through May the 1st. And then on April 2nd, the governor closed schools for the rest of the school year. Now, I always believe that it's important to have guiding principles, and from the onset of the closure, we established the following: ensure students are safe and fed, ensure learning continues, ensure our seniors are in a position to graduate, and to ensure our staff are safe and supported. And additionally, throughout the last 13 months, we've consistently and constantly asked ourselves, how do we emerge from this pandemic stronger than before? And how do we reimagine education? We were certain we would learn so much during the pandemic that could serve us well in a post-pandemic world. And we want to capture those opportunities and embed them in our future ideation of education. It's our quest to continually improve. Now moving on to ensuring that students are safe and fed. We wanted to ensure that students' basic needs were being met, and that included continuing to provide meals for students. We immediately went to work to enhance our already existing summer feeding model into a system where we could provide breakfast and lunch for all students. We went from providing meals to a few thousand students each week to nearly 800,000 meals during the closure. And because we fed anyone under the age of 18, not just our students, our expenses certainly exceeded our revenue. So I'm so grateful that the COVID-19 Crisis Response Fund of the Greater Evansville region provided funding for this endeavor to help us make up the deficit. Now, the following video will provide some additional insight into the unique approach we took to feed more students with AmeriQual, who's been an invaluable partner.
When I think back to last spring, what makes me most proud is how not only were we so focused on the learning continuing for students, but we were also continued to focus on the food insecurity needs and increasing access to foods across the community. So because of our existing partnership with AmeriQual, that was already so student-oriented, so community-oriented, we were able to pivot and change our process together to really focus on meal kits and distributing these meal kits across the community. And the other thing that was so amazing about this was how so many people across the community came together to support this. They believed in it, they had a sense of urgency around it, and they helped us make this happen. And that's the power of a community that feels a sense of urgency and has a common problem they want to work together to solve. And this was another example of that happening right here in Evansville.
We do all kinds of meal kits where we thought if you could put 5 breakfast, 5 lunch, you could basically hand a box to an individual student and have them fed for a week. And I think we had discussions with EVSC to talk about, can you even double that so you can have only 1 interaction every 2 weeks? And we have multiple programs where we buy commercial items plus some of the items we produce. And we looked at it internally and said, number one, EVSC is a very important partner to us. They're in need, and this is something that we do all the time. We do commercial meals, we do disaster relief meals, we do military meals, and the ability to turn this around quickly was something that our team did, and I think it was the fastest to market product we ever had. But also, the opportunity to provide, very good products and take our learnings that we've learned from the military. And the military has the benefit of probably some of the best food scientists in the world. And we're able to take some of that knowledge and repackage it for school children, for babies, for those who are suffering from disasters and such. And so, partnering with EVSC was kind of an extension of our mission, from serving our country to also serving our community. And I think, the relationship and the development of RAMP really opened our eyes to the local community and what we can do and be a good corporate citizen. And one of the coolest things as a part of that, we had RAMP students actually being a part of assembling some of those meals and putting some of the entrees in the meals. So it was a very unique situation where you had EVSC ramp students in our facility assembling meals that went to students, for the COVID relief. So it was pretty interesting and exciting and made us all feel pretty good internally.
So imagine the logistical components that were necessary to distribute nearly 800,000 meals throughout sites throughout our entire community, all while adhering to new mitigation strategies to keep our staff safe. There are not many school systems that have the capability to deliver critical resources at that scale of that magnitude. And in addition to providing needed food for our students and families of the community, we wanted to make certain that our students had resources and assistance where and when they needed them. We all know the pandemic hit many families so very hard. We were able to quickly transform our existing social emotional learning resources into short video lessons. We then placed these videos on our website, which enabled our families to use these resources at home. And we also incorporated these videos into our WNIN lessons. We were also proud to partner with the YMCA, Deaconess, and Ascension St. Vincent to provide facilities allowing the YMCA to provide childcare for healthcare workers in the community. This partnership enabled many healthcare professionals to continue to provide their essential service to our community. And just as we work to meet students' basic needs, we also were working to ensure learning continued throughout the closure. As you may have heard in news reports, this pandemic laid bare and magnified existing equity issues throughout the country. We immediately began to look for ways to increase access to virtual content for our students. While technology in and of itself was not new for our students or our teachers, the way in which it now had to be used was new for very many. We created an extensive library of support videos to help our students and teachers navigate this new environment. And one of the ways we were able to reach our students remotely during this shutdown was through an incredible partnership with our local PBS television station, WNIN. Teachers, counselors, social emotional learning specialists created and presented instructional lessons that were aired on WNIN.
The WNIN partnership really allowed us to reach students that could have had potential barriers to learning because of possible internet access at home. So this was a way to put lessons out over the air. And then for those individuals that did have a steady internet access, they were able to access these lessons through social media. We produced 220 lessons led by our teachers and by our counselors and by our social emotional learning specialists throughout the spring and then into the summer. They covered a wide range of grade levels so that students could learn from home. And so for many students, this was an additional layer to those projects they were already completing in being connected to their classroom teachers. Our teachers did a phenomenal job. So much work was required to come into our studio to be prepared to do a 25 to 30-minute lesson. But they certainly rose to the occasion, and they created lessons that were not only well done, but they were high-quality academic activities that they were leading their students through over the air. WNIN did a phenomenal job of partnering with us. There was so much back and forth communication because we were on a tight timeline, and really the project was very seamless. So this is something that we can really look back on in the pandemic and know that it did impact so many of our students and families, and we're very grateful to all who were involved.
Well, I tried to think of how I would present it to my class if they were sitting in front of me. And I tried to make sure that I included as much of the vocabulary and the same activities that we were going to do if they were with me, only I did them by myself. I felt a little bit like Steve from Blue's Clues for a while. I would just kind of talk to this empty classroom and imagine that my kids were talking back to me. So I think I tried to just imagine what it was going to be like if I had actually been teaching it to kids in my classroom and just give them the same type of lesson that I would have, in the classroom. I just wanted it to be authentic, is really what I wanted.
So as we began virtual learning and everyone went home because of the pandemic, there was a lot of stress, right, and anxiety of the unknown. We knew that families and students would have that high stress load, and we wanted to ensure that students had the opportunity to remember the strategies that they had learned in school, to notice and identify their feelings, their anxiety level, or their fuel level, and have some strategies that they could share with their families of what they can do to cope with that high stress load. So we knew that that was going to be extremely important for our families and our students to be able to be involved in during that pandemic.
Yeah, so I think I really didn't think about how far-reaching it was going to be at first. I just imagined my own, 24 kids from my classroom watching these, or even just Delaware kids. But after one of my lessons, I actually got a text message from my nephew, who is a third grader on the west side at the time, and he said, "Oh, you just taught me triangles." And then I heard from even Warwick County students who lived near my mom who had seen the videos, and I thought, wow, that's really cool that I got the opportunity to not just teach Evansville kids, but Warwick County kids too. And then I heard from parents say, you kept my kid connected and you allowed us to still have some sort of normalcy or some consistency and still learn in our house when everything else was so crazy in the world. So it's really interesting when kids stop me and say, "Oh, you taught me third grade math this summer," or "Oh, I watched your triangle video this last summer." It's really, it opens my heart, and it makes me so happy to know that I was able to reach so many kids, because that really wasn't what I was thinking about when I was teaching. I was thinking about, my 24 kids who I was missing so dearly. So it helped me to feel like I was still able to do my job without just looking at a computer screen, and for kids who couldn't be connected.
The last teacher featured on that video was Kathy Hoffman, and you may recognize her as this year's Elementary Educator of the Year. The WNIN partnership is just another example of the capability we had due to the 5 elements that I mentioned earlier. We had several school districts that reached out to us as well as to WNIN to learn how the EVSC was able to produce such high quality, made-for-TV lessons in-house. But not a single school district felt they had the expertise to undertake such a project once they learned all that was involved in order to create, to produce, and then to provide TV-ready digital content. One of the challenges we faced was the rapidly changing information that was coming from the state regarding requirements for seniors to graduate. Once we received information from the state, our teachers and counselors then worked to ensure our seniors remained on track to graduate. Those changes impacted all of our nearly 1,300 soon-to-be graduates, their counselors, and their teachers. And it also required numerous programming changes to our information systems in order to communicate all of the critically important data to the Indiana Department of Education. This is just one of many examples of invisible changes that had to be made in this ever-changing environment. And we know our teachers and our staff are the ones that make a difference every day in the lives of our students. And it was very important to us to make certain that we were able to support them along the journey. We knew it wouldn't be easy, but we made the commitment early on to continue to pay all of our employees. We were extremely fortunate that the state of Indiana continued to provide tuition support during the mandatory school closings. But we did experience a tremendous loss of revenue from our paid programming that was canceled due to the school closures. But in spite of our reduced revenue, we continued to pay all of our employees and honored all of our contracts. We also made sure that our employees had as many resources and training opportunities available to them as possible so that they could feel confident and supported with their newfound duties and responsibilities. All the while we were working to finish the school year in such an unprecedented environment, we were also researching and developing plans for the 2020-2021 school year. Once again, because of the systems we had in place, we were able to develop plans that would lead the successful reopening of our schools. And I am so blessed to have brilliant and talented individuals on my team. We immediately began reviewing data and research regarding European schools and their handling of the pandemic. We also relied heavily on local, state, and national health experts. Early research from the American Academy of Pediatrics confirmed that in-person learning was best for students. And we also knew that many of our parents would lose their job if we did not provide an opportunity for safe, daily in-person instruction for their children. And all the while we were analyzing expert data, we were also reviewing our over 5 million square feet under roof to determine how we could utilize and repurpose that space. Additionally, new school, teacher, and student schedules were being investigated that would allow us to accomplish proper social distancing for student and staff safety. Each schedule was analyzed to determine the additional staffing that it would take to lower our class sizes to accommodate the square footage contained in each and every one of our classrooms, as well as the new learning spaces that we were creating in our schools. And then there was a need to reconfigure every single bus route in order to lower the number of students who had traditionally been transported on each bus. And all of this work had to be accomplished in a matter of a few weeks, as opposed to the traditional time frame of 5 to 6 months. Here's a video that will share a little more light on just one aspect of that process.
When we looked at doing in-person instruction for the 2021 school year for our kids, the number one concern was our ability to social distance, so to make sure that we could keep our kids safe when they were in the buildings. So for two of our large elementary schools, Highland and Hebron, we were not going to be able to socially distance our students safely in those buildings, even if we used every space as a classroom in those buildings. So that meant we had to think about what could we do to guarantee in-person instruction that was safe for those students? Because it wasn't an option to say all of our other EVSC schools get to have in-person instruction, but Highland and Hebron, because our enrollment is higher and the buildings wouldn't allow for safe social distancing, that those students had to be on a hybrid schedule or something different. When we thought that through, it made the most sense to look at what if we moved our oldest students out of those buildings, so our 4th and 5th graders. We don't want to have kindergarten students who are starting their elementary career have to go to a different school. So we thought about our oldest students, but then the question became, where are we going to put those students? So EVSC being a bit of a larger corporation, we have the luxury of some buildings that we could look at differently. So we thought about every building that we owned. We thought about the administration building where we all work. Could we move all of us out of this building and turn this into a school for those grade levels for the year? We also looked at commercial space that was vacant and thought about whether we'd be able to repurpose some of those spaces to work for school for this upcoming school year. After a lot of research and thought and planning, where we landed was, with our existing school buildings, if we shifted some students out of buildings into other buildings, we'd be able to create a spot for our Highland and Hebron students. So what we ended up doing is we have one of our schools, Harwood Career Preparatory High School, is not a large enrollment school. And what we were able to do is safely move those students to our Academy for Innovative Studies and still be able to socially distance our Academy for Innovative Studies students and our Harwood students inside that facility, because that's the former North High School. It's a large facility. That enabled us to take Harwood Career Prep High School and turn that into essentially what we ended up calling the annex for Highland and Hebron, and moving our 4th and 5th graders there.
It was a very large project in a short amount of time. Not only did we have the moves from Highland to Hebron, we also had the internal moves at Highland, Hebron, Diamond, AIS, and Harwood. So that was just coordinating that process was the biggest part. Everybody cooperated to get this project accomplished because we had a very short timeline, so we were able to meet our goals before the start of school.
Then you had to think through logistics of transportation. We have buses that are taking students to Highland and Hebron. We're now adding the annex as an elementary location that we have to get students to.
We were able to set up transfers in the morning from both Highland and Hebron down to the annex to get the students there for their school day. The challenge in the PM was getting the kids back from Hebron because of the distance between the annex and Hebron. Highland was not an issue. We were able to arrange a schedule differently for another school to free up some buses so we could get those kids back to the school on time to get them home, and we were able to do so safely throughout this year.
Change is hard. For sure. And thinking about moving your student or your classroom to a building that you weren't planning on them being in this year is definitely was something difficult for people to digest. But I think what we were able to do at the Annex was so positive for our kids and our teachers. You think about kids who got to experience being in a building with students from another building. If you're a Hebron student and you might have been able to forge a friendship with some Highland students who are also in 4th and 5th grade. I think that was so positive for our students and for our teachers. And the fact that we were able to get our kids in-person instruction in a safe, socially distanced manner for this year, I think that our decision to open the Annex was incredibly positive.
That video ended with Dr. Minahan, and interesting enough, this is her birthday today, so happy birthday, Katie. The graphic that you see here shows several of the key decision points that had to be made just to accomplish this one move. I think we can all see that we moved entire buildings to ensure that we could keep our students and our staff safe. Well, in addition to setting up social distancing in classrooms, we also knew the importance of enhanced cleaning regimens and providing PPE for our students and staff. This graphic shows the number of supplies we obtained before school started, all in an effort to keep everyone safe. So was this investment really worth the cost? I would say unequivocally, absolutely. Not only did this aid in our fight against COVID, but the incidence of flu declined in our buildings from a total of over 1,100 last year to just a total of 5 this year in that same time frame. Once again, as we evaluated classroom space, learning environments, and mitigation strategies, and as we were working to expand the number of meals prepared and distributed in our community, and as we were preparing lessons for our WNIN partnership and developing new school, teacher, and student schedules, new bus routes, investigating purchasing the best PPE, and working to make certain our students could graduate, well, we were also working to ensure our teachers were equipped with the latest and most up-to-date information and training for remote instruction. Our curriculum maps were redesigned and realigned to account for student learning loss. Schools were also assessing the needs of our students regarding internet accessibility that would be required regardless of the platform that they would utilize to receive instruction both in the spring as well as the fall. As you know, we decided early on that we wanted to provide safe, daily in-person instruction. We also knew that we needed to provide options for our families. So in July, we surveyed our families to determine their preferred mode of education. And the survey confirmed what we had suspected, that the vast majority of our families wanted in-person instruction. But the survey also provided valuable data regarding the number of parents who desire to have a virtual option for their students. Fortunately, we already had a well-established EVSC virtual academy. With the continued uncertainty of COVID, we decided to keep enrollment for our virtual academy open until the start of school to allow families more time to make the decision that they felt was best for their family. And while I still believe that that was a very beneficial move for our parents, it did present a number of challenges for us as we had to adjust and reallocate resources to accommodate the needs of all the families we're blessed to serve. Now, obviously, academics is at our core, but we also recognize the importance of offering extracurricular activities, including athletic opportunities for our students. This past summer, athletics became our test case for bringing students back on campus because this was the first time that anyone had returned to any of our campuses. And we knew that if this failed, the opportunity to reopen schools in the fall would have been in serious doubt. So let's hear from Coach Owen and 2 of our top athletes about the factors that played in this success.
As we prepared for a return for the first time since school had been shut down, right then was excitement, but also we were very cautious about making sure that we did this the right way. It was going to be the first attempt back with our students and our adult staff interacting during what was a global pandemic. At this point, when learning that we were going to return, it was most important that we earned the trust of our families and also of our coaches. As our athletic directors, we put forth a plan that we felt like we could return safely. The number one goal throughout all of this in July was not necessarily to get back and become the better athlete, but to get back and show the community that we can all interact as one and return to school safely. So the return to school for our students, we were kind of the test.
Yeah, when we first just got started back, when we found out the date, we were all so excited. We have been working out, trying on our own to stay in shape as best as we could. We couldn't get into a gym, obviously, so it was very difficult. But whenever we got that date, we all were so excited. I know we all knew that this year was going to be like a really good season because we had so many seniors that were coming back, and we just knew it was going to be a great year. So we were just super excited to just get back in the gym and train.
I mean, I would say for me, I feel like our coaches played a huge part on that. You know, we weren't allowed to do as much stuff, but our coaches also, just made sure that we were safe at the end of the day, no matter what we did. They just made sure that we were able to do that on top of doing what we love to do, which is playing football and being around each other and lifting and stuff like that. So I would say our coaches played a huge part on that. And us as players, we figured out, hey, we won a season. We want to be able to play. So we had to follow those protocols. And as a team, I feel like we did a really great job with, keeping, that distance and keeping our mask on and just doing what our coaches say so we can be able to play.
Amazing work by our head coaches here within the EVSC. All of our coaches, we hope to be transformational coaches, and never before had there been a better example of our head coaches just simply checking on the well-being of our athletes. Sure, all of our head coaches wished and hoped that they were shooting their free throws or running their miles, but most importantly, all of our head coaches realized we must check on the well-being of their family and the student athlete to earn that trust so that when they return, we can work together to get back into school.
One of the last major decisions that was made this past summer was to delay the start of school by 2 weeks, while also implementing a soft start for our students. This allowed us to monitor COVID cases that were beginning to increase when that delay was announced. The soft opening also allowed us to bring back half of our students at a time so they could become better acclimated to the new mitigation strategies. This soft opening approach worked so well for us that we are going to continue this for the upcoming school year. Communication on a variety of platforms with all of our stakeholders has been a very intentional focus throughout all stages of this pandemic. The communications team built 40 school-specific reopening websites, as well as producing and publishing our district-wide reopening plan to help our families navigate these new processes and procedures that all would use. Now, one of the primary methods of communication for EVSC is through social media. And in just 6 months, EVSC reached a staggering audience of individuals who viewed our information, nearly 1 million impressions a month. And we also leverage podcasts and interactive Facebook Live sessions to continually keep our stakeholders informed, engaged, and up to date with the latest information. As you can see, the reach data were nearly 113,000 for just these 2 sessions. And those numbers were not a fluke. These 2 sessions about the reopening plan as well as the new school calendar netted a reach of over 158,000. Well, believe it or not, everything you've heard so far is just getting us to the point to where we can reopen our schools. One of the most effective protocols in keeping our schools open was the implementation of a COVID team in each of our schools. And in addition to their day-to-day responsibilities, these teams were responsible for contact tracing, for distilling information to our families and staff. And this became even more vital as the state struggled to keep up with the ever-increasing demand across Indiana. Additionally, the COVID teams, along with district staff, continue to monitor the situation in our schools and in our community. And as reported by health officials, there was little to no evidence of any spread of COVID in our schools. In addition to creating policies and procedures for in-person learning, we also planned for another potential school closure. All of our families were surveyed to determine their internet needs, We added 6,000 additional computers. We surveyed business partners to determine internet availability for our students. And this heat map took an incredible amount of work, but we were ready in the event we needed to close our schools.
In the fall of 2020, the EVSC surveyed business partners to determine internet availability for students and created an Evansville area heat map of free Wi-Fi access points families can utilize for virtual learning. Students can search our Wi-Fi database of over 100 schools, local businesses, and community partners to find a reliable internet connection that is close to their home. In addition to being sortable by location and internet speed, the interactive map will also show additional information about how to connect to that Wi-Fi point and where to park for the best connection speeds in case those locations are closed. Students can use this free connection to download homework, email their teachers, participate in synchronous learning using Google Meet or WebEx, and watch videos related to course assignments.
Finally, we built another 80 plus websites that contain school-specific virtual and hybrid learning information in the event we had to close schools to daily in-person learning. And as you can see from these last two slides, we put a tremendous amount of effort into planning and preparation that fortunately we never had to use. And all along, in the spirit of our continuous improvement DNA, we've been asking questions about what we've learned this year so that we can be better moving forward. And because of everything I've shared with you today, I'm so pleased to report that we never had to close a single school for a single day this school year due to COVID. I'm so grateful to our incredible staff, our teachers. They have worked so hard to make certain that learning continued and in-person learning continued for our students, and that everyone stayed safe. I also want to acknowledge the role that the community played in our success. You know, at every State of the School address, I always say that it is impossible for me to envision a vibrant community without a vibrant public school system. But this year, I want to add one more thing to that statement. There is no way that we could have successfully navigated the pandemic without the support of partners like AmeriQual, WNIN, the EVSC Foundation, the COVID Crisis Response Fund of the Greater Evansville region, Youth First, JA, elected officials, community and business leaders, our EVSC families, the Vanderbilt County Health Department, Deaconess, and Ascension St. Vincent, just to name a few. Our success is your success. And you know, it's always been that way. It's just that the pandemic magnified what now became very, very obvious. So I would encourage you to take the program that you have in front of you home with you today and read the quote on the back. Please don't do it now. But read the quote on the back. It's from Mass Insight Education. They've been a phenomenal partner with us for the last 9 years. And they have a national perspective that I think you will find very, very noteworthy. Now, this is the time where we would sit back and typically enjoy a selection from one of our honors performing groups. But unfortunately, the mayor stole every single choir I had for his State of the City address. So that's not going to happen this year. But I do want to end with this. We live in a community that works together, that collaborates, that cares for one another so much that this community raised $6 million to provide for and to support individuals in their greatest time of need. And far too often, we do just take for granted those tremendous community assets. But I pray that decades from now, the stories that are told of the pandemic are not ones of loss, but ones of triumph. Triumph over challenges that other communities could not overcome because they do not and did not possess our enduring spirit of care and compassion for one another. So I ask that you remember this one example of Evansville's efforts during this pandemic that resulted in this amazing success story. EVSC, your public school district, is the largest school district to be open every day for in-person instruction. That means every single school, every single day. This year, the largest district to accomplish this in the state of Indiana and Kentucky and Illinois and Ohio and Wisconsin and Iowa and Missouri and Minnesota and Tennessee, Michigan, North Dakota, South Dakota, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. And that, my friends, is the entire Midwest of this great nation. And you made it happen for the benefit of our kids. Thank you. Thank you. I am so humble. I am so honored. I am so blessed to be your superintendent for your public schools. Thank you so much. God bless.